One of the most captivating and enduring legends, passed down through generations among the indigenous people of the Solomon Islands, is the existence of colossal giants. These massive beings are believed to inhabit the underground caves and tunnels that connect the islands. There are differing opinions among the people about the nature of these giants. Some consider them to be benevolent, while others claim they are dangerous and malevolent. Some stories even recount how they hunted, killed, and consumed humans. For a long time, these tales were dismissed as mere folklore. But recent research has begun to suggest that there might be some truth to these narratives. The Solomon Islands boast a rich and intriguing history dating back hundreds of years. Legends tell of numerous explorers who journeyed to these islands in search of the world's most valuable treasures. Spanish explorers during the Age of Exploration followed trade routes and tales mentioned in ancient texts, leading them to these mysterious lands. The islands were officially discovered in 1568 by the Spanish explorer Álvaro de Mendana de Nera, who set sail from Peru. Mendana believed vast quantities of gold existed on the islands, hence naming them the Solomon Islands. These rumors of riches spread for centuries, prompting people from all corners of the globe to embark on quests to uncover these gold deposits. However, Mendana's claims of finding gold were never substantiated. Modern companies, on the other hand, managed to extract significant amounts of gold from these same islands. This raised the possibility that Mendana might have been right, and vast quantities of gold still await discovery deep within the earth. Interestingly, the Solomon Islands gained fame not for these riches, but as the dwelling place of giants. According to some eyewitness accounts and descriptions, these giants stood at least 3 meters tall, with some said to be even larger. Their hair was typically black, brown, or red, and quite long. They had red eyes, flat faces, and large mouths. While they might appear at first glance as mindless, savage beasts, some claim that the giants were intelligent, possessing their own societies and social systems. The locals believe that thousands of them lived on the island, utilizing the complex network of caves. These stories might sound strange and peculiar because giants, especially in such numbers, are not creatures that can easily remain hidden. However, it's important to remember that the Solomon Islands is just one of countless locations, tribes, and cultures that tell tales of giants. For example, thousands of kilometers away from the Solomon Islands, in Nevada, the Paiute Native Americans recount stories of a community called Sitaka, consisting of 3.5-meter tall men and women with red hair. When the Paiutes first arrived in the region, these giants were already residing there. Unfortunately, these giants weren't friendly and preferred to eat humans instead of animals. So it's safe to say they weren't very good at making friends. The Native American tribes had to put aside their differences and fight together against the giants. They managed to kill most of them. The surviving giants fled to a cave for refuge. Seeing the giants cornered, the Native Americans filled the cave with brush and set it on fire. The giants who escaped the cave were shot with arrows, and the rest suffocated to death. This cave where the giants hid was known as Cave of the Cane Eaters, but is now called Lovelock Cave. Lovelock Cave is located about 30 kilometers south of the town of Lovelock in Nevada. Inside the cave, archaeologists have found gigantic human skulls, 40-centimeter sandals, and large handprints during various excavations conducted over the last century. These discoveries continue to pique the curiosity of scientists and the public. Remarkably, the descriptions and behaviors of the giants in these stories bear similarities to the narratives of the Solomon Islands people. While even rumors of something extraordinary in the United States are often met with denial, dismissal, and sometimes even threats, countries like Peru take a different approach and present their findings to the public. Looking at Peruvian history, we see that the Inca kings were 3-meter-tall individuals with both red and blonde hair. In Lima's Gold Museum, you can still see the clothes and head of an Inca king whose height reached 3 meters. His preserved and dried head is about twice the size of a normal human head. Again, unlike in America, gigantic skulls and skeletons are found all over Peru. Many of these skulls don't look normal, and in most cases, these remains are only hundreds of years old. Countless stories and images of giants exist. For instance, a 30-kilogram giant hammer was found in a copper mine in Wales and dated back 3,500 years. Giant axes, swords, and other weapons were discovered in Iran. Giant remains have been unearthed in Arizona, California, Ohio, Peru, the Solomon Islands, and many other places. However, none of these surpass the story of a person who claims to have encountered giants and lived to tell the tale, along with evidence. Marius Boirayon worked as an airplane and helicopter engineer in remote parts of Australia and even served in the Royal Australian Air Force. In 1995, he decided to leave Australia and settle in the Solomon Islands. Marius lived and worked in the Solomon Islands as a helicopter pilot and engineer. He was fascinated by the country's culture, folklore, and everything about it, so much so that he married a local woman and became part of the tribe in a way. After a while, he started hearing stories about giants living in the region. At first, he thought these were just legends or folklore, but as he interacted more with the locals, he realized that these stories were more than just tales to them. The locals spoke of the giants as part of their civilization, just as we talk about historical figures. Marius's curiosity grew, and he began to investigate, conducting interviews, collecting statements, and recording the testimonies of those who claimed to have seen the giants on rare occasions. He compiled all the information he gathered and wrote a book called Mysteries of the Solomon Islands. He addressed every piece of information he collected in detail and even mentioned witnessing a UFO incident in the Solomon Islands and talked about a world order involving his own country, Australia. These stories and connections about the existence of giants are not limited to the Solomon Islands, but appear in many cultures worldwide. Even ancient texts mention giants. That's why archaeologists use these texts as a guide to find the remains of ancient civilizations. I've told you about observations and connections with other cultures. But there's one thing I haven't mentioned: military reports from soldiers who claim to have fought giants in the Solomon Islands and survived. The Guadalcanal campaign was a military campaign that took place on and around the island of Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands from August 7, 1942 to February 9, 1943. This was the first major land offensive by the Allied powers against the Japanese Empire during World War II. On August 7, 1942, Allied forces, primarily consisting of U.S. Marines, landed on Guadalcanal, Tulagi, and Florida Island. The objective was to use Guadalcanal and Tulagi as bases to capture or neutralize Rabaul in the future. This was achieved. Between August and November, the Japanese made several attempts to retake the island. Almost every day, 7 major naval and air battles took place. And finally, in early November, the last Japanese ships were sunk with the naval battle of Guadalcanal. The Japanese tried to make plans to retake the island by attacking from the sea and land. But in December, they gave up their attempts to retake the island and evacuated their remaining forces by February 1943. Even the Allied soldiers were bewildered and astonished, and this is where the story takes a strange turn. Apparently, Japanese soldiers were fighting 2 different enemies at the same time. It is said that Japanese soldiers stationed on the islands saw gigantic creatures, 3 to 4.5 meters tall. Not only did the Japanese soldiers see these giants, but they also fought them. But their weapons were ineffective against the giants. The Japanese troops lost more than half of their unit in that battle. Some soldiers were taken by the giants, while others hid. These encounters left indelible marks on the soldiers, and many recounted how they couldn't sleep, haunted by the echoes of their comrades' screams. And even if you don't believe this story, one thing is certain, and it's present in the records. The Japanese, who preferred death to defeat, abandoned a mission and returned home. Of course, as with every story, legend, and narrative, there are always different perspectives in light of the evidence and findings presented. I must admit that this story presents challenges in that regard. For example, the Japanese story seems a bit suspicious because people have been living on the islands for at least 32,000 years. Also, in the 1950s and 60s, the region was extensively mapped in search of mineral resources. Remember that people believe Mendana's story, and these people and companies spent their time exploring and exploiting. They left after obtaining enough. It's also possible that the Japanese fought with the indigenous people, and the indigenous people defeated the Japanese soldiers using jungle warfare and tactics, just like in Vietnam. Unfortunately, some of these indigenous people were cannibals. which explains the human-eating incidents. This brings us to the next point of the critics, and I must confess that this theory seems logical. Perhaps they really encountered exceptionally tall people. Gigantism was more common in the past, and due to the lack of medical advancements, many people continued to grow. Gigantism is a rare condition caused by high levels of growth hormone in the body during childhood or adolescence, leading to a person becoming very tall, or worse, continuing to grow without stopping. Throughout history, many individuals have been recorded who were tall enough to be classified as giants. For example, Robert Wadlow, an American who stood 2.72 meters tall, is one such example. Robert Wadlow is the tallest person ever to have lived and never stopped growing until he died. The tallest person still alive is Sultan Kosun, a farmer from Turkey. At 2.5 meters tall, he has entered the Guinness Book of World Records. He also holds the records for the world's largest hand at 27.5 centimeters and the world's second largest foot at 36.5 centimeters. He had to undergo a medical operation to stop growing because this condition was affecting his quality of life. Still, imagine seeing Sultan Kosun coming towards you in the forest. Personally, I would shout, "The giants are coming!" Honestly, I'm still amazed by the height of basketball players. These people are so tall. Take a look at these striking differences. I don't know, but this definitely falls into the giant category for me. And maybe that's what happened in the past. Take a look at Gorge Murasan, who is 2.31 meters tall. I definitely think that if they found his grave 200 years later, and his leg bone was longer than half the world's population, they would also believe that giants existed. The fact that they are in the NBA proves that giants are athletic. They can easily run, drag you to their hiding places, and basically do whatever they want with you. What makes things even more complicated is that throughout history, there have been many frauds and liars who claimed to have found giants and even took pictures with bones. However, it turned out that these bones were glued together to achieve that height, or, worse, photoshopped. One of the most well-known archaeological hoaxes in American history is the Cardiff Giant. This was a 3-meter-tall petrified man weighing about 1.5 kilograms, found by workers digging a well behind the house of William Newell in Cardiff, New York, on October 16, 1869. It quickly became an attraction after being found. This belief became so widespread that even President Abraham Lincoln referred to the lost race of giants and extinct mastodons while talking about the age of Niagara Falls. The crazy thing is that the person who planned all this was George Hull, and he did it to prove that people could be easily deceived. As an atheist, Hull got into an argument with Reverend Turk and his followers at a Methodist revival meeting. Hull wanted to show how easily people could be fooled. In 1868, Hull and another man, H.B. Martin, hired men in Fort Dodge, Iowa, to cut a gypsum block 3 meters long and 1.3 meters wide. Various acids and stains were used to make the giant appear old and worn. In November 1868, Hull transported the giant by train to his cousin William Newell's farm. Hull spent a total of $2,600 on this hoax, which is equivalent to about $60,000 today. He buried the giant in a pit on Newell's farm one night in late November 1868. About a year later, on October 16, 1869, Newell hired workers to dig a well, and that's when the giant was found. Hull was right. People bought it. You've probably seen this image too. It was so good that even I believed it. But it was all a lie. The interesting thing is that these images weren't made to fool or deceive anyone. They were actually created for a Photoshop contest. Some were made by the Weekly World News, a weekly newspaper that usually publishes jokes and hoaxes to make people laugh. But some people thought the pictures were real and shared them on the internet, and that's how the story spread. That's why most skeptics don't believe in giant stories. How can you distinguish between real and fake stories? Remember, these lies have been around for a long time, and we live in a world full of unexplained mysteries and wonders. Even after telling this story, I feel like I've only touched the tip of the iceberg.